This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The spokesman for the Iraqi government, Ali al-Dabagh, confirmed that Saddam's half-brother, Barazan al-Takriti, and Awad al-Bandar, the former head of Iraq's Revolutionary Court, were executed by hanging at dawn for their role in the killing of 148 Shia Iraqis in the village of Dujail. Al-Dabagh said that Takriti's head was severed from his body during the execution.
وفي حالة نادرة الحدوث فقد انفصل رأس المدان برزان إبراهيم الحسن عن جسده.
In a rare incident, the head of the condemned Barazan Ibrahim Hassan was severed from his body during the execution. The Iraqi government will notify the families of the condemned and ask them to claim the bodies.
لاستلام جثامينهم.
They want to hold us accountable because we are merely Ba'thists. This is not right.
Takriti did not only enjoy the prestigious and luxurious life associated with this position. Along with Saddam and others, Takriti was pursued, arrested, and prosecuted in the aftermath of the U.S.-led invasion in Iraq. Barazan Ibrahim Hassan Takriti, who was Saddam's half-brother, was executed by hanging at dawn. In a stormy case that has become known as the Dujail case, Barazan was often seen arguing with the presiding judge. Barazan was found guilty of taking part in the killing of nearly 148 people in the aftermath of the failed assassination attempt against Saddam in the village of Dujail in 1982. Amidst angry verbal altercations between the presiding judge, Rauf Rashid, and Takriti, the latter had been kicked out of court on numerous occasions.
Your Honor, are you trying to humiliate me?
If you were standing before a martial court, you would not be able to speak like this.
What do you mean by a martial court?
You know what I mean by a martial court.
No, I don't. You know that I am right.
Sit down, sit down. That is it. Get him out of the court.
Barazan pleaded not guilty to charges that he was involved in the arrest and torture of 148 Shia Iraqis in the aftermath of the failed assassination attempt against Saddam.
The court calls the defendant Barazan Ibrahim. The court has reached a verdict.
On November 5th, 2006, the court found Takriti guilty of crimes against humanity and he was sentenced to death by hanging.
The court is hereby sentencing the defendant Barazan Takriti to death by hanging.
Barazan Takriti had served as the head of the Iraqi intelligence agency for nearly 4 years. Between the years of 1988 and 1999, he had served as Iraqi's ambassador to the European Union in Geneva. Amidst conflicting reports that he had defected from the Ba'ath Party, he returned to Iraq. Takriti was often described as the person overseeing Saddam's bank accounts abroad. Awad Hamad Bandar, who was the third man to be executed by hanging in the Dujail case, held a law degree from the University of Baghdad. Bandar, a Shiite member of the Ba'ath Party, served as the head of the Iraqi Revolutionary Court, where the defendants accused of carrying out the 1982 assassination attempt against Saddam were tried. Bandar defended the death penalty he handed down to the 148 Iraqi Shias, saying that the condemned carried out an attempt on the life of the commander-in-chief for the armed forces during a time when the country was involved in a war with Iran. Iran was behind the assassination attempt.
God prevails over the oppressors. God prevails.
Facing the same fate as Saddam and Barazan, Bandar has been executed by hanging after being convicted in a criminal court for his role in the Dujail genocide trial.
Al-Bandar and Barazan's executions generated mixed reactions among Iraqis and created fears that the executions may create divisions in the country.
The executions will cause big divisions in the country. This is wrong.
The execution will not affect the country. It will not have any effect. It will not affect the security situation in the country. The security situation is only affected by what the government does.
All these issues should have been resolved a long time ago, but they prolonged the whole process, and at the end, we are paying the price. People are dying in the streets, people are getting killed in the streets, and no one seems to care.
They had a fair trial by the Iraqi government. Awad al-Bandar was never fair. He was an unjust man, and he did not treat people fairly. He used to convict people based on their clothes, whether they were wearing a black or a white shirt. That was his justice.
The execution is in the interest of the Iraqi people, the Arab world, and the Muslim nation in particular. What Bandar and Barazan did to the Iraqi people cannot be ignored. They destroyed a nation. When they ruled over Iraq, they only cared about themselves.
Execution is not enough for them. They should have been handed over to the Iraqi people. The Iraqi people should have decided what to do with this criminal. What we saw in court and heard from witnesses is only the tip of the iceberg. They were talking about the way he used to kill women and children. The government should have handed him over to the people to decide his fate.
Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah criticized the government for adopting the economic reform plan as well as the international court without consulting with the opposition. In an interview with the Kuwaiti daily Al-Anba, Nasrallah said the Lebanese people could no longer bear the burden of taxes and wrong government policies. He added that he feared the international court be used for political purposes. Nasrallah stressed that the United States was blocking efforts to form a national unity government in Lebanon. He said the aim of the U.S. was to strengthen Fuad al-Senura's government because in reality it was their government. It was the government of U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman, and Senura's government accepts all demands by the U.S. administration without discussion. And in resuming their campaign against Fuad al-Senura's government and its economic reform plan, the Confederation of Labor Unions have called for a new sit-in to take place at 2 p.m. today at the Ojero building in Bir Hassan. The United Nations has approved South Korea's plan to send up to 350 peacekeeping troops to Lebanon. South Korean troops have been asked to guard a military supply base, strategic points and supply routes near Tyre, 80 kilometers south of Beirut. The South Korean parliament last month approved the government's motion to dispatch up to 350 troops, mostly combatants, to the Middle East country. Seoul is still in talks to determine the exact size of the South Korean contingent and the date of its deployment. Meanwhile, Malaysia has delayed the scheduled deployment of hundreds of troops to join the United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon because of logistics issues. According to a military official, the troops' departure has been postponed to the 22nd of January. As another roadside bomb injures 3 civilians in central Baghdad today, the executions of Barzan Ibrahim al-Tikriti, Saddam's half-brother and former intelligence chief, and Awad Hamid al-Bandar, the former head of Iraq's Revolutionary Court, took place early today, 2 weeks and 2 days after the former Iraqi dictator was executed. In confirming the executions, a government spokesman said the head of Tikriti had been severed during the hanging in what he called a rare incident. While the U.S. hailed the executions as bringing justice to the Iraqi people, the EU condemned them, reiterating its opposition to the death penalty. Layla Salah reports.
Violence continues to shake the heart of the Iraqi capital as a roadside bomb planted under a vehicle exploded in central Baghdad today, wounding 3 civilians. Meanwhile, as Iraqis and Americans prepared for a new joint security operation to secure Baghdad as it faces spiraling sectarian violence, Iraqi officials announced the executions of the former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's half-brother, Barzan Ibrahim al-Tikriti, and Awad Hamid al-Bandar early today. Al-Tikriti and al-Bandar had been found guilty along with Saddam of the killing of 148 Shiite Muslims after a 1982 assassination attempt on the former leader in the town of Dujail, north of Baghdad. 2 aides to Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki confirmed that the executions had taken place. They spoke on condition of anonymity because the government had not yet released the information. The executions reportedly occurred in the same military intelligence headquarters building in North Baghdad, where the former leader was hanged. Many in Baghdad reacted with joy at the news of the execution of the 2 top officials. One Iraqi resident claimed that the hanging of the 2 men implied justice and was the second expression of joy after the first being the hanging of Saddam. The 2 men were to have been hanged along with Saddam, but Iraqi authorities decided to execute Saddam alone on what National Security Advisor Muwaffaq al-Rubai called a special day. Amid the political turmoil and violence, the White House said that the Iraqi government was bringing justice to those guilty of crimes. When asked by AFP to comment on the executions, White House spokesman Scott Stanzel said that Iraq is a sovereign government exercising its judicial system to bring justice to those convicted for brutal crimes against humanity. Stanzel also said that he did not know whether U.S. President George W. Bush had been informed of the new hangings in advance, as he was in the case of Saddam.
Syria, the second country on Washington's blacklist, was the destination of a 6-day visit by the Iraqi President Jamal Talabani, who is not a stranger to the country which provided him with a safe haven when he fled the former Iraqi regime. Nevertheless, he is the first Iraqi president to visit Damascus in 26 years. This time, however, Talabani will discuss sensitive issues, focusing on the security situation. Intisar Yonis reports from Damascus.
Syria and Iraq are resuming their diplomatic relations after 27 years. But it seems that the Iraqi President Jalal Talabani and the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad will have to go their separate ways. Talabani, Damascus's former ally, who was drawn to it by his animosity towards Saddam Hussein, now finds himself pulled away from it by his friendship to the United States. The Syrians now view Talabani as one of Washington's men in Iraq.
Contrary to the radical statements we'd heard from Washington, I think that Talabani's visit to Syria would have never taken place without U.S. approval. Perhaps there is an implied American consent that Syria and Iraq should reach an agreement to improve the security situation in Iraq.
Talabani's spokesman denied that the visit was influenced by the U.S. However, the talks between the 2 countries and Talabani's demands, especially the ones pertaining to security, have the thumbprint of the United States, not to mention the timing of the visit, which comes after Bush had announced his new strategy on Iraq. Damascus has sent a very clear message to Washington through its warm welcome of Talabani. It is yet another confidence-building measure by Syria towards the Americans. These measures were initiated not too long ago when Damascus and Baghdad resumed their diplomatic relations.
أكدت وزيرة الخارجية الأمريكية كوندوليزا رايس.
At the start of her tour of the Middle East, the U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice confirmed her country's commitment to finding ways to implement the stalled roadmap for peace and show the Palestinian people the possibility of making progress towards the creation of a Palestinian state. However, Rice did not present details on Washington's supporting role in the peace process. Israeli officials said that Rice presented a number of options, including creating a temporary Palestinian state with temporary borders. This idea was rejected by Abbas. Palestinians are concerned, and Israelis are supportive of Rice's offers, which always happen to be presented during Palestinian crises, even internal ones.
بواقع فلسطيني متأزم حتى على المستوى الداخلي.
Contrary to what several sources have said prior to the visit of U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to Israel and the Palestinian territories, this visit does not carry with it anything particularly new. In Ramallah, where Rice met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, she reaffirmed her country's commitment to achieving tangible progress in the Palestinian-Israeli path in the roadmap. She also discussed America's interest in finding a solution to end Palestinian suffering and supporting the presidential institution. However, Rice did not make any progress in her visit, which is her 8th to the region since being appointed Secretary of State.
My work is going to be best focused on trying to accelerate the process of the roadmap in the next few months, which will, in the end, result in a Palestinian state. I hope to open a political horizon between the Palestinians and Israelis. This is what I'm focusing on, but it will be good to hear from as many sides as possible.
That's what I'm focused.
The Palestinians presented to the American Secretary most of the stalled issues, which Rice previously agreed to review without achieving any concrete advancements on them, such as the siege, Israel's arrest and raid policies, the prisoners in Israeli jails, freezing settlement activities, and the shortage of needed weapons for Palestinian security agencies. However, the most prominent aspect about Abu Mazen's meeting with the American Secretary of State was his absolute rejection of any temporary solution through temporary borders.
We reiterated to Secretary Rice our rejection of any temporary or transitional solution, including the establishment of a state with temporary borders, because we do not see it as a realistic option that can be built upon. We also reiterated that what is required is active and continuous movement by various international and regional parties in order to end the conflict.
During the first hours of her arrival to the region, the U.S. Secretary of State met with many Israeli officials in West Jerusalem. Again, these meetings did not produce any progress other than emphasizing the need to accelerate the roadmap, thus confirming that Rice remains restricted only to reviving and restoring the path to peace. That is, unless her meeting with Olmert on Monday can produce different results. In addition to the Palestinian territories, Rice will visit Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. The topics that will be discussed in these countries will not only focus on the issues being discussed here regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thus, nothing new is expected to occur in the coming days.
Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas will hold a three-way summit in the near future. That was the decision reached this morning during a meeting in Jerusalem between Olmert and Rice. No timetable was released for that summit. IBA's Eli Wogelerter has that story.
One day after promising to increase U.S. involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice made good on that pledge by brokering a three-way summit between the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinians. No details of the talks were formally released, though aides said that the Trilateral meeting will take place in 3 to 4 weeks. Olmert held his first formal meeting with Abbas on December 23rd. The PM reportedly told Rice that Israel would take, quote, unprecedented steps in peace negotiations if the Hamas-led PA government or a unity government met the criteria spelled out by the quartet. The two agreed, however, that they would not recognize the Palestinian unity government if it did not meet the quartet's criteria, including recognizing Israel, renouncing terror, and upholding past agreements. The three-hour meeting also focused on ways to boost Abbas's standing as a means to push forward the diplomatic process. Outside the Prime Minister's residence, a handful of demonstrators from Meretz protested the lack of movement on talks between Israel and her neighbors, including Syria.
We are demonstrating here in front of Ms. Condoleezza Rice, American Secretary of State, and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's meeting, calling upon Ms. Rice to call off Olmert's bluff. We think that an Israeli-Syrian negotiations is both an American and an Israeli interest, and we find it really hard to believe that America is vetoing these negotiations.
Following the meeting, Rice left for talks in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. She is scheduled to fly to Kuwait tomorrow for meetings with leaders from 8 Arab countries. Those leaders are expected to tell Rice that they will help Washington stabilize Iraq if the U.S. takes more active steps to revive a broad peace initiative between Israel and its neighbors. Rice's visit is her 8th trip to the region during her 2 years as Secretary of State. Eli Wogelerter, IBA News.
Much ado about nothing. That's how some medical experts described reports opening Channel 2 News last night, detailing Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's eyelid surgery, which he failed to report until 2 days after the fact. Olmert underwent the blepharoplasty procedure on Friday. The operation, which is largely cosmetic but also helps improve one's field of vision, took place in a private medical clinic under local anesthesia and lasted no more than 40 minutes. Because the procedure did not entail general anesthesia, there was no need to transfer the authority of the Prime Minister. As of now, there is no law in Israel requiring the Prime Minister to report details of his health care. However, Olmert yesterday informed the cabinet of his surgery. More buildings set for the West Bank. The Ministry of Housing today published a tender for the construction of 44 new housing units in the city of Ma'ale Adumim. There was strong reaction to the decision from both the left and the right, pointing out that the move came during a visit by U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. The Peace Now movement said the government was tearing its own obligations under the roadmap to shreds. The Yesha Settlers Council praised the decision, saying that the new construction offered at least a partial solution to the growing demand for housing in a town such as Ma'ale Adumim, which, according to national consensus, should always remain a part of Israel.
على الرغم من الإصلاحات التي جاءت بها النظرية الإسلامية، إلا أنها اصطدمت بسور عظيم اسمه العرف العشائري. فالتقاليد القبلية التي عاشت وتعيش متغلغلة.
The Arab society is entrenched in tribal traditions, which, just like religion and law, play an important role in the lives of Iraqis. Tribal traditions are not necessarily all negative. If this were the case, then the Prophet, peace be upon him, would not have said that he was sent to build on these noble traditions. We leave you with Faris al-Murshid.
مكارم الأخلاق. قيس المرشد.
تشتهر أغلب مناطق الجزيرة العربية بوجود العرف العشائري الذي يعتبر بمثابة سلطة شبه.
The Arabian Peninsula is known for its tribal traditions, which play an important role in people's lives. Tribal leaders have the authority to make laws and make sure that they are enforced. Arab tribes are well known for their generosity and hospitality, but that is not the whole story. According to most Iraqi citizens, tribal traditions can also be strict and can have negative consequences on people's lives.
نتجت عنها آثار سلبية على حياة المجتمعات والشعوب.
These Arab traditions affect Iraqi society. I am one of the people that was affected by these traditions. I was engaged to a woman, but all of a sudden, her cousin insisted that he had a priority to marry her.
This is not healthy. Many young men do not have problems with these tribal traditions because they give men a lot of freedom to do what they want. What is the wisdom in giving men the right to prevent their female cousins from marrying other men? This is totally unnecessary.
Islam has a clear position against those kinds of tribal traditions. Many tribal traditions not only contradict Islamic principles, but they also tend to undermine the modernization process in the country.
There are some problems in our tribal traditions, and we must deal with them. We must differentiate between humanitarian traditions that are in tune with our reality and other tribal traditions that contradict with civility and humanity and are not in tune with our reality. We must make a clear distinction between these two kinds of tribal traditions.
However, the leaders of some tribes believe that many of the tribal traditions are based on Islamic principles, and that most tribes reject backwardness and rigidity, which have caused many problems to many citizens.
Islamic decrees are our constitution. The Islamic laws are our constitution, and all of us adhere to these principles regardless of our different religious sects. Tribal traditions have strong influence on the Iraqi society. The Iraqi tribes are the ones who established the Iraqi government and the law. These traditions are the foundation of the Iraqi law. However, some of the customs that are not so good are a temporary phenomena due to the special circumstances we live in.
مع ما تحمله هذه العشائر من تقاليد.
Although the tribal traditions have impacted the civil and educational aspects of the Iraqi society, the majority of Iraqi citizens understand that the role of the tribes cannot be ignored. Tribes have played a positive role in establishing and protecting the Iraqi society.
العراقية بغداد.
Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says to bring Muslim nations closer together is an attainable goal, adding scholars shoulder a heavy responsibility in that regard. In a meeting with a host of Shiite and Sunni scholars on Monday, the leader underscored if unity takes hold in the Islamic world, Muslim states will no longer have to turn to the US and Britain out of weakness. Ayatollah Khamenei reiterated there are differences between various faiths and sects, which is something natural, adding today colonial powers have cashed in on prejudices and misunderstandings to sow the seeds of discord in the Muslim world. Ayatollah Khamenei said hegemonic powers are at pains to provoke divisions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan and Lebanon, adding those trying to trigger discord are neither Shiites nor Sunnis. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad arrived in Quito, Ecuador, early on Monday on the last leg of a three-nation Latin American tour. In a meeting with his Ecuadorian counterpart, Rafael Correa, the Iranian president congratulated Correa on his election as Ecuador's president and said the presidential polls in the country was a clear indication of ongoing changes in Latin America. Ahmadinejad underlined that the foundation of world hegemony is on shaky ground now, a reality which he said is more obvious in the Middle East than in other parts of the world. For his part, the Ecuadorian president said his country is keen to work with Iran closely on all fronts. The two sides also agreed to make the necessary arrangements to open embassies in both nations' capitals. Iran is to install some 3,000 centrifuges to produce nuclear fuel. Government spokesman Ghulam Hossein Ilham told a weekly press conference on Monday that Tehran is heading towards nuclear fuel production, which he added requires 3,000 and even more centrifuges. As planned, Ilham underlined Iran is to generate at least 10,000 megawatts of electricity, which needs 10 power stations. The government spokesman reiterated all of Tehran's nuclear activities are under the close watch of the IAEA and in compliance with the NPT provisions. He noted Iran has no problem for talks with the US if held fairly. US President George W. Bush once said he was determined to stick to the Iraq war, even if his wife and his dog were the only ones left at his side. And now the deepening crisis in the war-shattered country is moving in that direction.
People in the United States were already angry about the war before Bush said he would try to bring unrelentingly violent Iraq back from the brink by adding 21,500 more U.S. troops to the 132,000 there now. Polls show the U.S. public overwhelmingly does not like the idea. Democrats, always in opposition, were joined very publicly by some Republicans in dissent. Political historians say the now open revolt of increasing numbers in Bush's own party could be very dangerous for the president. It makes it much more difficult for Bush to get support during the final 2 years of his presidency and increases the likelihood his policies will be seen by history as a mistake.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Feyerdahl Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.